North Wales coastline has also fared poorly in freight terms since the closure of Holyhead Freightliner terminal in 1991. But nuclear flask traffic still provides 2 trains a week from Valley, just a few miles short of Holyhead. The flasks are brought to Valley by road from Wilver Power Station on the Anglesey coast. Interestingly, the track layout at Valley includes this triangle, specially installed in 1989 for turning steam locomotives. Until a few years ago, flasks from Trowsvanith Power Station, which is at the end of the line from Blawnau-Festiniog, would have been waiting at Llandudno Junction to be combined into an evening departure to Sellafield. However, Trowsvanith has been out of use for some time now, and at present any new rail flows look very uncertain. The only daily freight working on Anglesey these days is the block chemicals train to Amlwch. Each weekday morning at about 7 o'clock, a Class 47 diverges from the North Wales coastline at Gaerwen and follows the 16.5 miles of meandering single-track railway to the associated Octel works at Amlwch. If it wasn't for associated Octel, this delightful line would certainly have closed a long time ago. The main chemicals conveyed to Amlwch are chlorine from Ellesmere Port. Outward flows include ethylene dibromide, plus occasional tank loads of bromine from Amlwch to continental Europe. These cargoes are always flanked by barrier wagons, plus a brake van at each end of the formation. The BR boundary is passed just beyond Amlwch's disused run-round loop, and the train then completes its journey over a 3/4 mile long light railway, dating back to the opening of the chemicals plant in 1952. The 4 level crossings on the factory extension have to be individually operated by a member of Octel staff, who can then give the driver authority to proceed along this final private section. Once the train is safely locked into the factory grounds beyond the level crossing gates, a complex sequence of shunting manoeuvres takes place. It isn't just a question of exchanging one set of wagons for another. There's the added complication of barrier wagons and brake vans to contend with, and it all has to be accomplished on a limited amount of track without run-round facilities for the 47. For internal movements, Associated Octel keeps this 040 diesel hydraulic, built by Hunslet in 1977, plus a 2-axle diesel mechanical shunter, dating back to 1952. Altogether, the BR train will spend about an hour shunting before it's ready to set off again. The main purpose of the Amlwch plant is to manufacture bromine from seawater, and with an output of roughly 30,000 tonnes each year, Amlwch is the largest plant of its kind in Europe. Bromine and its compounds are extremely useful chemicals. Bromine itself has applications in bleaching, disinfecting and dyeing, for example, while its various compounds find their way into a whole range of industries, from agriculture to pharmaceuticals. A vital ingredient in the refining process is chlorine, and that explains why several tank loads of chlorine are included in each day's consist. It's good to see loads like this being kept off the roads, although not everything can be conveyed by rail. Sulphur, for example, which used to be brought in by rail from Mostyn, is now road hauled from Runcorn. These empty chlorine tanks, easily distinguishable with their orange stripe, will shortly form the BR train back to Ellesmere Port. Usually the Class 47 will be on its way again by about 9 o'clock, heading initially for Llandudno Junction Yard, where the load will be staged until the evening. Trains on the Amlwch branch haven't always been Class 47 hauled. In fact, it was a Class 31 that received the name Amlwch Freighter in 1986 to mark the renewal of Associated Octel's contract with BR. There's a short pause again as the train negotiates the first of several gated level crossings just outside the works. Once the gates have been closed again, the train will be able to proceed at a constant but leisurely pace all the way to Gaiawin. Hardly an arduous task for this 2,500 horsepower locomotive. The railway to Amlwch was opened in stages between 1864 and 1867, but like many rural lines, it never really lived up to the high hopes of its promoters. An original possible source of freight traffic was the Paris Mountain, just south of Amlwch, where various minerals, including silver, copper and zinc, were mined. But no sooner was the railway built than the supposedly copious deposits of minerals started to run out. The route meanders through some very attractive countryside before passing the inland waters of Llyn and then on through the small towns of Llanerchymeth and Llangefni as it crosses the island. The line was once popular with holidaymakers, and the normal service was often supplemented by specials at peak times. The single platform at Llanerchymeth still survives today, even though it lost its train service nearly 30 years ago. The branch was always single track, although a passing loop was provided shortly after opening at Llangefni, and another one was installed in 1914 at Llanquilloch. Additional minor stations on the route were located at Rosgoch and at Holland Arms, where yet another branch line once diverged to Red Wharf Bay. Most trains on the Amlwch branch were confined to running to and from Gaiawin, though a double-track connection with the main line there was provided to allow through running to Bangor when required. Two interesting developments took place in the early 1950s. One was the opening of the associated Octel plant with its guarantee of regular freight traffic, and the other was the introduction of prototype lightweight diesel multiple units, intended to cut costs and improve the line's chances of survival. In the event, only the chemicals traffic has lasted, although the local passenger and pickup freight services both survived until December 1964. But where there are tracks, there is still hope, and a limited company was set up in 1991 with a view to reintroducing summer charter trains on the branch during 1992. Various groups and bodies have supported the idea, and the chances of passengers being able once again to enjoy the distant views of Snowdonia as they amble through Llangefni and Llanerchymeth are now very high indeed. Access to the main line at Gaiawin is by means of a ground frame. Nowadays there is only a trailing connection onto the branch, so any train heading towards Amlwch must first set back over Gaiawin's crossover before continuing its journey. Hopefully this useful rail freight operation, largely unseen by most locals and visitors to Anglesey, will be able to continue, providing a sensible and cost-effective service. Not far from the North Wales Coast terminus at Holyhead is another major rail freight customer, Anglesey Aluminium. The main rail traffic here is petroleum coke, used to make anodes for use in the manufacture of aluminium. The coke comes from Humber Oil Refinery at Immingham and is loaded into a specialised fleet of covered hopper wagons for its 220-mile coast-to-coast journey. Generally, there is one block train a week, timed to arrive at Holyhead in the early hours of Saturday morning, returning to Immingham on Sunday evening. Occasionally, though, a second train is laid on in the middle of the week. All the other raw materials are imported through the company's own nearby deepwater harbour, then moved direct by underground conveyor onto the site. Anglesey Aluminium has quite an extensive network of rail sidings, and the various shunting duties required within the plant are carried out by this 040 diesel hydraulics supplied by the Hunslet Engine Company in 1970. Ironically, that was the year when rail access to Anglesey was temporarily severed by the Britannia Bridge fire, but thankfully the rail traffic to Anglesey Aluminium was able to start up again as soon as the bridge reopened in 1972. Finished aluminium ingots are distributed to all parts of the UK and to many destinations abroad as well. Some of the traffic is loaded into cargo wagons and sent by rail using the Dover-Dunkirk train ferry. These 2 wagons will be taken to the BR exchange sidings on site, ready for collection in the afternoon. With rail freight distribution pulling out of the Holyhead container terminal, and with the recent demise of the Speedlink network, it might have been expected that Anglesey Aluminium would lose its regular freight service. In fact, an ingenious solution was found to carry on servicing the aluminium plant using the Amlook branch locomotive during its Llandudno Junction layover time. So, on 2 days each week, the RFD Class 47 makes an afternoon trip from Llandudno Junction to Holyhead and back, passing on the way the popular tourist spot at Llanfair PG. The station, with its rather whimsical full-length Victorian name, even includes an approximate phonetic transcription, in case any non-Welsh speakers just might want to have a go at pronouncing it. After first delivering diesel oil to the BR fuelling point at Holyhead, the 47 on its return journey calls here at Anglesey Aluminium for the cargo wagon traffic. When the train eventually returns to Llandudno Junction, the empty tanks and the cargo wagons will be combined with the Amlook traffic which arrived there earlier in the day, and the whole lot will then be conveyed overnight to Ellesmere Port. That isn't the end of the story for the cargo wagons, of course. They'll need to be tripped from Ellesmere Port to Crewe, and then conveyed to Dover on one of RFD's trunk European services. Another characteristic traffic flow on the North Wales coastline is ballast from Penmaen Mar. Most of the ballast is sent to civil engineers depots in northwest England, and there are usually 3 or 4 departures each day to depots at Crewe, Manchester and Liverpool. This Class 31, with its so-called Dutch livery, is clearly a member of the civil engineering fleet. Not many people realise that North Wales still has a working coal mine at Point of Ayr near Prestatyn. This coastal pit sends out regular daily merry-go-round trains to Fiddler's Ferry power station on Merseyside. Just a few miles east of Point of Ayr is the thriving railhead for bulk chemicals traffic at Mostyn Dock. Deliveries are scheduled to take place 3 times a week, usually at around 8 o'clock in the morning, and certainly never before 7:30 when the signal box opens. To the traditional clanking of levers and pulling of semaphore signals, the BR locomotive will perform a double reversal on the North Wales main line in order to gain access to the exchange sidings. The train has come from the BP Chemicals plant at Saltend near Hull, and has also called at Ellesmere Port Yard to exchange traffic with other chemicals services. Warwick Chemicals at Mostyn Dock is a relative newcomer to the BR freight scene and only started receiving regular supplies by rail during 1991. Tanks are shifted between the exchange sidings and the discharge terminal by one of 2 040 diesel electrics built by the Yorkshire Engine Company in the late 50s and early 60s. Because of the tight curves in the docks area, all Mostyn's chemicals traffic has to be carried in 2 axle tank wagons. The 2 bogie tanks seen at the head of this departing train were in fact returning from Ellesmere Port to Saltend, and had simply been routed via Mostyn for operating convenience. Mostyn has seen a variety of freight traffic in recent years. Perhaps the best known was the flow of raw sulphur to Amlook, which lasted until 1989. Unfortunately, plans to move timber by rail to Mostyn never came to fruition. But at least the end of railborne sulphur traffic didn't mean the end of this fascinating rail freight backwater. This optimistic new chemical traffic flow certainly makes a refreshing contrast to many of the current more gloomy rail freight losses. And long may it yet survive.